Last time we were together, we used the shooting board to shoot the edges of some very thin pieces of oak so that we could create a glue edge. Two pieces of wood that just fit together just perfectly. And we glued them together to make this panel. Now, having glued it together, that's impressive. Now we got to do something with it. The glue has dried, I've scraped it off, but it's still just a rough panel. Now the trick is when you glue things like this to match the grain pattern, what you can often run into is the fact that the grain in one piece will run in one direction and the grain in the other piece will run in the contrary direction. That creates problems for thicknessing, it creates problems for finishing, and that sort of thing. Anyway, we're going to set this one aside and we'll go back to the piece for the front of my little cabinet. This is done the same way. This one is, as you can see, it's matching grain patterns, even matching knots. And certainly the grain does run in different directions on each board. So it's a bit of a pain to do it that way, but it gives you that nice matched pattern. However, this panel is partly thicknessed. Once it's glued together, it's got to be brought down to the proper thickness, and we gauge the thickness with a marking gauge. I've marked it out. I don't know, it's kind of faint, but I've added a little pencil line there in the gauge line so you can see where we're getting to. Now, because the grain direction will often run in contrary directions when you put boards together like this, we've got to approach it with some different techniques. We can take a plane, set nice and sharp, plane as much as possible off. That works fine. The trouble being, the plane will leave a bit of tear out. Where the grain reverses, the plane will leave a little bit of a rough surface. So I just want to show you a couple of other tools that can be really helpful when you run into this problem. Get my grain oriented the way I ought to. Well, we'll try it this way. See, one of the problems is to avoid this tear out, and I want to show you a couple of other tools. One is an antique tool. It looks like a small plane, but you notice the cutter is almost vertical. If you have a look here, the cutter is actually not smooth across. It has little ridges cut into it, like little teeth. I don't know if you can see the reflection of the little teeth or not, but you can feel it there. This is a tool, a toothing plane it's called, a toothing plane, and typically it was used for preparing wood to lay veneer on. But it's also a wonderful tool just for roughing out, for working down. It's kind of the 18th and 19th century equivalent of a belt sander. Here, I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to use it to rough up and chew down this surface. Now all I've done is use the toothing plane to rough up the surface. I just run all over it. What you get out of the plane, it's almost like dust, little tiny shavings. And the surface of the wood is now dull and rough. It's almost like burlap. It's kind of textured. But this plane is just a wonderful tool for going down. The grain doesn't bother it one way or another, and it just plows right through the knots. Now is the question, how do we smooth it up? Well, I find the best way is to follow a toothing plane with a scraper. Now scrapers come in all kinds. We can have just a card scraper. thin piece of spring steel. Just bend it with your thumbs. It has a little hook burnished on the edge, but oh, what a wonderful tool. So it just picks off the high points left by the toothing plane. Can also use basically a scraper in a plain body. See, the toothing plane is almost vertical. The scraper plane is a little over vertical. The blade has a little hook on the edge, the same as the card scraper. Again, it just takes out tiny little shavings. And of course, there's the good old Stanley number 80 and all the variations that are made of that. And I've set it kind of rank. That will smooth up the surface. It'll work it down to the gauge line. If you don't have a toothing plane, just use scrapers. The toothing plane just makes it go a lot faster. Anyway, don't be terrified of the grains being in different directions. Use the tools you have, get it down to the thickness you want, finish it up, and you're ready to go.